We're a community created to provide nurses with support, advice, and a safe place to talk about ongoing challenges with other nurses going through the same things as you are. So hopefully you'll recognize we have Bruce Langford back with us again. It might have been a couple months ago. We ran out of time talking about mindfulness. So we have Bruce back, and we have Kara with us today. And if you're in the audience live, feel free to ask your questions, put them in the chat, and we'll bring him in and we'll ask Bruce. And I don't know, what you guys want to help me get this kicked off? Bruce, you want to tell people a little bit about what you are? I didn't mention your podcast yet, but you have your own podcast.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a podcaster. My podcast is called Mindfulness Mode. So I talk to people on a regular basis about mindfulness, but I'm also married to a nurse, and she's a trauma nurse, a critical care nurse. So I said to her, hey, what do you think would be a great topic for today? And she said, you should talk about the unrealistic expectations for nurses. She said, it is so difficult. It's getting harder and harder because, first of all, there's a shortage of nurses. So a lot of times she goes into her shift and they are understaffed. And secondly, nurses are just being pushed to do more and more and more. And I think that's true across the board. So she said work stress and anxiety and this fear of falling short are a major part of what she's dealing with on a regular basis. And I know the workplace can have unrealistic expectations because, nurses are stretched to do so much more than they can physically do. And if you're a nurse on the floor, a lot of times you may have like so many patients that you're trying to deal with. And in the case of a trauma unit, you've got so many things to deal with those specific patients. And you're trying to do your very best, but I know there's this fear of falling short, and it's very similar to that fear that a lot of us have of I'm not enough. What's the matter with me? I could do more. I could be better. And I think it's all related, that fear of not enough. And so I put together some thoughts and ideas that we could talk about on this show. So if you have any questions at all, definitely put them into the chat.
Well, I will say this topic was very compelling as I was helping promote this show, but I was thinking, how are we actually going to address this? This is I'm really curious what we're going to talk about here, because yes, I think we could all agree that this is an issue. So, but I'll let you get into it.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I think that we have to do is I think we have to remember to breathe. And it sounds so simple. It sounds like, oh my gosh, don't tell me he's just going to say breathe. I mean, that is so, over talked about, but actually it's one of those things that when you're trying to do so much and you're in there in the hospital and you're trying to do this and that and help this patient, help that patient, you probably will notice that all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm not breathing. I've got tension in my neck. I've got tension in my shoulders. I've got all this stress going on. I need to just stop and breathe for a minute. And so that's one of the first places that we can start with this, is that you need to be really noticing whether you're breathing properly, taking deep breaths or not. And there are ways you can get your day started with deep breathing. And one is just to put that in your schedule and say, yeah, I'm going to take 2 minutes and do some deep breathing. And another thing, I just interviewed a person a few days ago, and he said he starts every day off with a cold shower because that cold water forces him to do the deep breathing, forces you to take a deep breath. And if you've ever experienced a cold shower, you'll know what I'm talking about. You just have to start
That's kind of
breathing.
drastic. I don't know.
Well, he swears by it, and I've done it for a couple of years. I did cold showers every day, and it's true. It really helps to make you feel alive and make you feel like you're breathing deeply and you're ready for the day. So I highly recommend it. I know, Mike, I know it. It's one of those things that does not sound very appealing. That's for sure. But another thing I want to mention is that as a nurse, it's really important to feed yourself with what energizes or relaxes you. What are you doing in your personal time that really feeds you? Because you're probably going to be exhausted by the time you get off work. You've worked so hard, and especially for nurses that are working the night shift, maybe you're not sleeping as well as you might want to. But what are you actually doing to feed yourself? So think about, what would you like to do? What would you like to do in your off time? So a lot of people like to do active sports, get out there and do cycling or walking or running, or maybe even playing some team sports or something like that. And a lot of times I think we don't take time to do the things that feed us, and especially nurses, because nurses are uh, so much a personality where you're helping other people, you're compassionate about others, and you may be a person who forgets to look after yourself. Maybe you'd like to go out there and take a pottery class and get into pottery, and maybe that will relax you and feed you. Or writing can be something that can really help you to work through a lot of these stresses. But it's really important to feed yourself. So I wanted to mention that. And the third thing is, I know with my wife, she's just so intent on getting to work and doing everything she can. But sometimes it's necessary to pace yourself and maybe take a mental health day, take a personal leave day. And I think most nurses have at least a couple of personal leave days that you can take. And it's really important to be willing to do that for yourself when you need it. So you have to be taking stock of what you need. Yes, Kira, you have a question. I'm really interested to hear this.
I was just thinking, not exactly a question, but right, like I was thinking from the perspective of the nurses, this is where a big problem lies, right? Because we're talking about, take time for yourself, but they're being told, we don't have enough nurses, just work more. Can you work more? And it's like nonstop, nonstop, like you were saying, always being asked to do more. So it's kind of hard when we're saying slow down, take time, take a day off, because they're like, well, I would love to, right? But that's not reality. So I
Yeah,
was just thinking of that, like, that's the struggle, right? That's kind of the crux of it. So
so
trying to
true.
fit like a lot of that take time into the tiniest bit of time that they have is, do you have more tips around that? Like how to get more of like the deep breathing, the little bits of time where they can fit it in, especially throughout the workday?
Yeah, well, the one thing I wanted to mention is to let go. And we hear about that, especially in this mindfulness space. Like, how are you going to let go of these stresses and this anxiety that you've got, that you're carrying around with you? And there's a letting go technique that you might have heard about, and it's called the Sedona method. And it's very, very effective. And it's based on this whole idea that I already alluded to, and that is that as humans, we overcomplicate things. A lot of times things are much more simple than we really will accept. And that's true for the letting go technique. And it's a practice that focuses on the idea that every emotion that comes to the surface is something that can be let go of until there's nothing left but the feeling of peace and utmost fulfillment. And it might sound really crazy to you, but it's true. If you think, hey, what is that tension I'm feeling right now? What can I really identify it? What am I feeling right now? And then the first step to doing this is asking yourself a series of questions. And the first question is, could I let go of this? So I've identified what this stress is, I've identified the anxiety, and then I just simply ask myself, could I let go of it? And it's as simple as, if you do this exercise, you hold a pen in your hand. If I wanted to, could I let go of it? Yes, I could. And it sounds overly simple, but yes, I could release the muscle tension that I'm holding that pen with, and I could let it go. So if I have an anxiety or a tension, could I let it go? So answer that question. And then the second question is, would I? Would I let it go? Am I willing? Or would I rather hold on to this feeling, this pain, this suffering? Because as human beings, we do this. Sometimes we think, oh, I have so much anxiety, but we haven't really stopped to think, oh, I'm hanging on to this for a reason. There's something in my subconscious mind that's telling me to hang on to this tension instead of let go of it. So by boiling this down to these simple questions, you're just really dealing with it. Would I let it go? And then after you answer that question, the third question is when? When would I let it go? Would I let it go now, just like I did when I dropped the pen? Or do I need to sit with this for a while? Do I need to digest this? When? This is an invitation to decide to do it now, which is always the best time to do it. But maybe you're going to say to yourself, no, I have to sit with this for a while. I can't let go of it now. And this is a very effective technique. And there's actually an entire movie on YouTube that you can watch that's based on this. And it's very, very interesting. I interviewed the man that talks about the Sedona method, and his name is Hale Dwoskin. So you could watch the movie by just going to YouTube and searching Letting Go, the Sedona Method movie. Just type that in, Letting Go, the Sedona Method movie, and you can watch that movie. Or you can go to my podcast and listen to the episode where I talked to Hale Dwoskin, and you just need to go to mindfulnessmode.com/570. It was episode 570. Any questions that you have about this method? Do you have a question, Kira? Go ahead.
Yeah, it brings to mind what the obstacles to letting go would be, right? Like if you answer it, could I let it go? Yes, right. But am I able to? No. Like I think like sometimes what we stress about is part of our identity, right? And so it's like I can't let that go because then who am I without that?
Good point.
Right? Especially as nurses carrying around like I am the person who is always worried about everybody, right? Because that's how I take care of them. And if I let that go, if I drop that, I'm not taking care of them anymore.
That
Maybe
is so true.
right, part of the identity. So, what would some tips to working through the obstacles of like, am I willing to let it go right now, be that you can think of? If they could come up with answers like, well, I'm too afraid to let go because that's who I am.
My first tip is to journal this and to just start writing. Who am I? How do I see myself? What is my identity? And start journaling that and writing down your thoughts, and just allow yourself to just spill whatever thoughts onto the page that appear there. And if you're a person that's uncomfortable with just sitting down and writing, then just sit down and hit record on your phone and just start talking, and just make sure that you're in a private place where you can talk and don't feel like somebody's eavesdropping on you. Just let it flow, let it out. And if there are silences, if there are times when you can't think what to write or what to say, just allow those silences to be. I think that's the thing. We so much of the time we're beating ourselves up. We're thinking, "Oh, well, this isn't right. I'm not writing the right thing, or I should be writing something," and there's silence. But just allow it to be whatever happens. So you're so right. We have these identities that we cling to, we hang on to them so tightly sometimes, and if we can let them go, that can help us a lot in life.
And can help us discover who we really are too, right? Maybe we're not a person who cares for everybody by worrying, but we're a person who can care for people by taking care of them, and then also have time left over for ourselves to do the self-care things you were talking about and
Exactly.
do the activities that we enjoy.
Exactly right. Yeah.
I love
And
that exercise of just writing you get to until you're writing about things you actually like, right? Maybe even write about what you would like your life to look like so that you can focus on what you do want to do with your life. Because I don't think worrying, and stressing over everything is something people really want to be part of their identity. It's just who they've become. Especially I can imagine, nurses as caring for so many different patients and then having to leave them in such a quick amount of time. It might feel like, by keeping them in my mind and worrying about them, that's how I stay with them and take care of them. So that
yeah,
could be another obstacle of letting go, just reminding yourself that that's not the only way to care for people.
yeah, exactly. Another thing I wanted to mention is build a friendship with someone you can interact with, someone that you can just talk about whatever you want. You can just relax with that person and feel really calm and relaxed. And this might not necessarily be another nurse or another person in healthcare. It might be somebody that is just in a completely different space, a person that you can just let go with. And you can enjoy that time of just sharing. If you can build a friendship like that, even if it's not a close friend, if it's just a friend that you talk to once in a while, it can be an amazing experience. I know I went on a training uh, session. It was a 5-day training, and I met a guy on this, and we just connected on this. It was on Zoom. We connected, and that was about 3 years ago. And we've been talking almost every Wednesday night since then. We just connect on Zoom and we have a chat and we talk about what's going on in each other's lives. And there are lots of differences in who we are. He's not into mindfulness. He's not a podcaster. He's got a very different life, but for some reason we just like to talk with each other and share ideas. So I highly recommend that kind of thing to do. It can really help you.
Could another thing, oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to mention what you just said, Bruce. So that's really cool. A lot of people, I'm sure people have friends, but like it's so critical to have a place to go to talk. And like, I think I know that's what we're trying to do here with Care for Nurses is the peer support groups. And like, you guys probably don't know, I'm not ashamed of it, but I don't go around telling everyone that I'm in recovery. And so I've been doing 12-step meetings for almost 20 years at this point. And the blessing and the curse of something like that happening is that, of course, what happened wasn't the best thing, but it got me to a place where I now have this community where I can go and share and talk about my things and work on myself. Because everything we're talking about here is like, okay, unrealistic expectations, but the solution is actually working on yourself and changing our own perspectives.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that out there. I know what we're trying to do for anyone that has not had any experience with peer support groups. That could be a huge component in getting to where you need to go. And what we're doing here with Care for Nurses is providing that for nurses who don't necessarily need it, but want it. I guess that's maybe the way to put it.
Yeah.
Carol, do you think that was accurate how I described that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, definitely. I think talking to people about everything going on can be a nice way to let it go, right? Because you can talk about it and then move on to the next thing. But also, that somebody's there who gets you, who's there to support you, and that's exactly what we're doing here.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I know I've alluded to this, but it's really important to feel your feelings. Allow yourself to just notice what you're feeling, feel your feelings instead of running away from them. And in this society, that's what we tend to do. We a lot of times feel anger or stress, and it's like, okay, how can I push that away? How can I get rid of that feeling? When in fact, we need to do the opposite. We need to embrace the feeling. We need to know, oh, yeah, I'm feeling anger right now. I didn't even realize that I'm angry about a thing. And once we embrace it and notice it, then it'll just start to become smaller. It'll start to vanish. But in the meantime, you can do what I suggested earlier. You can write about it. You can talk to a friend about it. You can just deal with it. And it's so important to feel your feelings. And I'm sure you've gone through a lot of those exercises, Mike, in some of the work that you've done. Am I right?
Yeah. And, the biggest shift in thinking for me was that, like, you opened this episode talking about breathing.
Yeah.
I remember years ago when people would give me that suggestion and I want to punch them.
Yeah.
So you're telling me just breathe.
Yeah.
But like the idea, like I was so programmed growing up, and we hear it, you see it in the people on TV, and it's culture. It's like, if you have a problem, you take something.
Yes.
You put a substance in your body. You're always external. You're finding your solution externally. And the idea that I could just pay attention to my breathing, and it actually has a physiological effect. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it does. But I mean, you don't know that until you actually just take a leap of faith and try it.
It really does. I've even been working on that with my daughters, because they get upset and start trying to have meltdowns and everything about stuff. And I'm like, okay, let's breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, out for 4. Like, I do it a few times with them, because it physically does reset your brain. It turns off that alarm in your brain that's saying something's wrong, I'm going to die, And then you can actually use your prefrontal cortex and think through it logically.
Have you read this one yet?
What is that? Think.
You Are Here?
No, I haven't read that one.
Han?
I haven't read that one yet.
I mean, he's been around a long time. He's a I guess he's a Buddhist. Talks about mindfulness and all that. But I've tried all. Actually, I have another question I'll get to in a second. I've tried all different forms of mindfulness, and my current favorite simple way to do it is just not try to control the breath, but just say to myself, I am breathing in. I am breathing out.
Oh.
It's almost like, because I've experimented with just not doing anything, not saying anything to myself, and just trying to have no thoughts. Mm-hmm. And then I've tried the kind of the transcendental meditation approach where you're saying a mantra. Mm-hmm. And so I'm over the years, I'm experimenting with different ways of getting to the present, being here and now. And I feel like every day it's, I try something different. And I don't know, Bruce, if you want to talk about a favorite method, or I'm very curious if you have any 2 cents on transcendental meditation, because that's kind of seems to be a little, what's the word? Controversial, maybe?
It can be controversial. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, that's true. But you know what? I just feel like meditation of any form, whatever works for you, is something that can be helpful. And maybe you just go on an app, and there are all kinds of apps out there. Like Insight Timer is a really good one. Just go on an app and just start to do a little very short type of meditation. And it can be transcendental, but it doesn't need to be that method. It can just be, your own little meditation. And that's the other thing, is it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be more than 30 seconds to a minute. If you've never done this before, just give yourself a break and just try a very short version of just being quiet, being silent, being there with yourself, doing some breathing, and then move on with your day. And then you might think, gee, that felt good. I think I'll do it for 2 minutes tomorrow. And it, like I say, it doesn't have to be very long to be helpful. So yeah, any kind of meditation can be really, really beneficial. I would highly recommend it, especially for nurses and doctors and anybody in healthcare.
So we have about 5 minutes left. And I just want to make sure, I want to make sure like our topic was, unrealistic expectations, and I could read what we had, but I want to make sure that if there was anything else that you wanted to say on this topic.
We're pulling you all over the place.
Yeah, like I want to make sure we get to whatever your intentions were to cover on this topic.
Yeah, that was really my intention, is to cover breathing, to cover feeding yourself with what energizes or relaxes you. We talked about that, finding something that you really enjoy, like painting, writing, cycling. It can be anything like that. And then letting go and being kind to yourself. We talked about that. And we've talked about meditation and how that can be helpful. And I think, like you already said, in our society, we tend to think, oh, what can I put in my body that will make me feel better? Is it a pill? Is it alcohol? Will I smoke a cigarette? And, that's one of the things that with all the studies that have been done, it's really come forward that if you can avoid alcohol and cigarettes, do it, because those are the two things that will cause an earlier demise for you, and there are other ways to relax, and doing that is not a good idea. We all know it, but I just think I need to say that anyway, because in healthcare, I think a lot of people use some of those substances to try to deal with what they're dealing with, and instead use some of these other ideas that we've been talking about. Be willing to get together with a friend and talk to them and just unload that way. So, yeah, I think we've talked about quite a few different aspects. Do you have any other thoughts, Kira, that you'd like to mention?
Well, the question, why are the expectations unrealistic? First of all, maybe there's another avenue too of addressing whatever is going on, because beyond, processing it internally and learning to handle the stress, maybe we're taking on too much. So just looking at life and trying to get rid of some things on the calendar that might not be necessary, or talking to your boss about taking on, less work if possible, which I know that's a hard thing to even mention in this group, because the demands are so high. But it's still, it's still a question worth asking. If it does become something that is so hard in your life, at least ask, can I do less here or there? Or even, going to a different workplace that meets your needs better for your life. So I just wanted to make sure that it was addressing not just the internal things, which are so important for our perception and for our mental well-being, but also look at your life and see what you can change to make things easier for yourself.
Such a good point, Kira. Maybe you should be looking at whether you should be full-time, or maybe you could move to part-time. Maybe you could do nursing like a couple of times a week, and maybe that would serve you and your family better than what's happening now. Those are really good points.
And I wish they would pay better, right? Because the feedback that I hear about that is, I would like to, but I've got bills to pay, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So also look at organizations for different pay if possible. But and that's why we go back to how to process it internally. If you're really stuck in a position where you can't change your calendar, work on not carrying such a heavy load in your mind, right? The let it go definitely is extremely helpful too. But it's hard to do, right? It's one thing, just let it go, right? But it's difficult. So maybe before you leave, you could give us more tips on how to let it go. So we have writing about it, talking to friends. Is there anything else that can help people really let go of the things that they're carrying around?
Yeah, I think the most obvious one that comes to mind, and that's because I've interviewed so many people on the Mindfulness Mode podcast, is just deciding to let it go. Just thinking to yourself, wow, what are my thoughts that are going through my mind? How many of my thoughts are negative? How many of my thoughts are filled with anxiety? And, we can decide to have positive thoughts. We can decide that. And so just make a decision, and make a decision to change those thoughts. When you start to have all these negative thoughts flowing through your mind, just say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm letting go of it. As simple as that. Like I said, we overcomplicate a lot of this. And in fact, we can just simply decide not to have those negative thoughts.
That's true, as well as decide not to care as much what people think about us, right? That's
Exactly.
something when talking to people, I hear a lot of people carry a lot of weight about, well, what will this person think of me? That's a big weight that you can let
It's
go of. You
huge.
can decide not to care about that too.
It's huge. As Wayne Dyer used to say, what someone else thinks of me is none of my business.
Yes.
And I remember hearing that, and I thought, wow. And that really made a big difference for me. It's none of my business what they think.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because, right,
Well,
you can't control it. All you can
No,
do is do your best.
that's
You
right.
can't control it. And also, people see the world from their own perspective and from their own problems they're having inside, right? So if they're having a bad day, they might see you as a whole different person than you actually are. And there's nothing you can do about that.
yeah.
That's a good point.
Just to tie this back to the whole being mindful, to me, why mindfulness is so important is because I need to know what my thoughts even are. Like having the awareness of the thoughts. How many people are just walking through the world like a zombie and they don't even realize the negative thoughts that they're having? It's just there. It's not the idea that we can, number one, be aware of them, and number two, change them. I think is a pretty big idea for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So Bruce, do you have any final words before we wrap up here?
Yeah. My final words are simply this: be kind to yourself. Be kind. Stop beating yourself up. Stop judging yourself. Simply be kind to yourself. You are a person, probably as a nurse, who spends a lot of time being compassionate to others and thinking about how you can help other people. But it's time to be kind to yourself. That's how I'd like to end it.
Very nice.
That's good.
Yeah, well, this was fantastic. As usual, we could have gone another couple hours with you. So hopefully we'll do this again, maybe in another few months.
Yeah.
So if for those of you that are watching, please, you're going to be watching maybe the replay. Share that with other nurses that you know. Let's continue the conversation on the Care for Nurses platform. If you don't know how to get into that, go to carefornurses.com for more information. And I guess that's it. Hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Bruce.